This is the panel that is going to focus in on how it is that high school and middle school teachers have and can approach the Northwest Ordinance. And we're very fortunate to have two excellent exemplars of that with us today to guide us through this. First, Kimberly Huffman, who is a social studies instructor and department chair of the Wayne County Schools Career Center, received her Bachelor of Arts in Social Studies education from the University of Akron and from Ashland University. Since 2000, she's been instructing American government and has had various fellowships, won various awards, and we're very glad to have you here with us today, Kim. Secondly, we have David Wolford, who teaches at Marymount High School, teaches government and politics there. As a native of Ashland, Kentucky, attended the University of Kentucky for both a BA in education and an MA in history, and has written in various historical journals and magazines and the like. So thank you, David and Kimberly, for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you for that. We're excited to be here. David and I just met last night. We've been working on this. We were both asked to do this and are happy to do so. So thank you for welcoming us. It's not working?
Give us just a second here. If we try this here, you think?
We are.
Hit that arrow. There we go. Okay, a little preview of what we're going to do here. We're going to take a look at a few different things we do in class and just throw out some ideas as well. We have quite a few visuals and timelines and such. Kimberly here is going to give you a much deeper understanding of the land ordinance of 1785 that was asked earlier, so you get a little bit of an expansion on that. I'll be sitting over there while she's doing it. Then I'll hop back up here and give some more interesting tidbits about the Northwest Ordinance. After we're finished with the bulk of our talk, we're going to ask you guys to share some of the stuff you might do in class, and we're also going to look at some primary sources that we're going to provide for you for analysis and just to stir up some ideas. Before we're done, she'll also talk about the Civic Star Challenge and maybe challenge us to try to move up in the ranks of the states for the 250th anniversary. And we'll give an opportunity for quite a few questions.
First, we would just want to make us a little bit more personable here. We both included our family pictures. I did the traditional family Christmas pajama picture. This is my husband, Mick. He is in attendance in the room if you can pick him out. I have two daughters, Emerald and Alyssa, and my sons-in-law, who are both named Jake. And they are married. Jacob and Alyssa live in Washington, D.C., Alexandria, Virginia, and Emerald and Jake live in Stowe, Ohio. So that's my family.
Yesterday, when people asked me where I was from, and I told them Cincinnati, they generally didn't believe that. And I'm from Ashland, Kentucky, which it kind of hit me, but it's kind of the southeasternmost point just across the river from the Northwest Ordinance, I guess, so just outside of it. And I've got three Ohio State members of the family, not me, but I've been kind of converted, it looks like there. But my two girls are here attending OSU now, and my wife did just a few years ago. So,
we also included links to both our schools. I have a Facebook post that I allow my students and my community to follow my adventures. So it's called Mrs. Huffman's Civic Travels. So I've been to Germany and Belgium and multiple trips to DC and Philadelphia and all over. So it's available there. You will have an opportunity to have a copy of this presentation at the end that you can scan it. So those links and everything will be included for you. We'd kind of like to get to know who's in the room here. So I'm just curious, how many are high school teachers? Just a few. Two. Awesome. How many are administrators? What, one? Okay, good. And professors? Several. Curriculum directors? All right. I'm curious, everybody is, what? Middle school. Oh, I did have that. Middle school, yes. We assumed maybe you'd go to the science reading. I shouldn't have done that. Do I have any elementary teachers? No? Any retired teachers? Yeah. Very good. Well, I did have a couple gifts here. I wanted to give for a teacher that has been in the classroom the longest. So do we have any teachers that have been teaching longer than 20 years besides David and I? 20?
35 this year.
Woo! Yes, you need to be congratulated. I have a choice of quote cards. They have historical quotes, or I have a set from Mount Vernon cards. They're like postcards of all the presidents and first ladies.
You know, I am a Mount Vernon ambassador for the
So you already have them.
So I gotta go with Mount Vernon.
All right. Oh, would you get those for her? There's this stack of like the 2 sets in the rubber band.
Thank you.
Right there. Yeah, if you give those to her. Thank you. Do we have any pre-service teachers or student teachers? No, okay. I have some folders of all the materials that I brought, and if any teacher wants to use them, I was going to offer them to pre-service teachers, but you're more than welcome to them. So thank you all for being here.
Do we have who's in public history out there working at museums or whatever? I know there's some of that.
About that, yeah.
And we're going to kind of work on lessons and learning. So I know you folks come up with this kind of stuff too for the people that come to your museum. So hopefully it'll be helpful. Is it me? Mm-hmm. We are here in honor of this Northwest Ordinance, and because it's interesting and we're all fascinated with the story, but it's also because the state tells us to teach this stuff, right? So we've got some of the content standards up here just to kind of remind us, at least in K through 8 or 8 through 12, some of the requirements, and the Northwest Ordinance is in there, and there's some other things that are related to it, the Articles of Confederation and such. So that'll be yet another reason why we want to expand our knowledge today. I'll go ahead and step aside, and
Okay.
Kim's going to
You wanna
take
go
over.
this way, or you good? All right. So David and I were asked to do this presentation, and our first question was, why us? What do we do? So we just thought we would just share what we do. You can use it. You can take it and use it again. All these links will be available to you. The title of this whole weekend is about new perspective. And so what I thought about was I always include, when I teach the Northwest Ordinance, a lesson about the Land Ordinance of 1785. So I was so excited that question came up, and I don't know if you saw me, but I jumped out of my seat. I'm like, come to my session, because that's what I'm going to be talking about. I think it is vital and essential, and I think one of the things, this would be my critique of, I teach government to juniors, and I think they just don't get enough of local government, and I think both land ordinances combined really give them a sense of their own community. We're talking about townships and counties, and this is where they're living at now, and I'm always trying to bring the past to the present and show them that everything that we're learning about is applicable and important to them today. So I think it's really relevant to talk about the land ordinance of 1785 before you teach the Northwest Ordinance. So one of the things that I do, first of all, is I love primary documents, and I want my students to believe in their importance. My students get a folder every year. I give it to them. You get these at Walmart. And what I do is like this primary document extended series. And so all the primary documents, because in Ohio, as the content standards, there are particular primary standards that we are required to teach. And so I copy them all, and they are blue so that the students know that blue is for you to keep, and they keep these all year in their folder. And so when we approach that primary document, it's like take out primary document 4, 5, and so they all have those documents, and they get them in a folder, and then they keep them, and then we discuss them in their totality at the end. So each document has a analysis for the students for them to read through, to answer questions. The past 4 years, we've been doing inclusion classes, so about 50% of my students are special ed students, and so they require a little bit more modifications, accommodations. One of the things I do a lot for the primary documents is I maybe underline important vocabulary or highlight vocabulary, or maybe assist them in getting those questions a little bit more direct for them. So that's that primary document extended project that I do. The lesson plan that I use to discuss both ordinances is available to you. If anybody has ever done the Gilder-Lehrman Institutes, at the end you have to do this great big 20-page lesson plan and connect it to every standard it feels like that it ever exists. And so I do have an extended lesson plan provided there. And because under OTES, we also sometimes have to put our lesson plans in a template provided by the Ohio Department of Education. I also have that provided for you as well if you want to use that. I also have the PowerPoints that I would use for my presentation, so I'm just showing you the links that those are all there. This is what the particular land ordinance would look like, except it's blue, and then it's followed by the series of questions of which that I think were the most important for that document. Oh, I forgot to talk about this map. One of the other things that I think is so vital is that our students do not know how to use maps. Physical, tangible maps. And it's like a Christmas. When you hand out, I do county maps, you'll see here in a second. I hand out maps and students have to locate their townships and their villages and their cities within their counties. And this requires a lot of walking around the room and helping and assisting because they're not used to this. Because everything is reachable to them on a cell phone. They can just Google it. And so I really do think looking at maps and timelines, and these two land ordinances just work perfectly to incorporate maps. There's so much that can be said and done. At the previous panel, it talked about the land disputes between Virginia and Maryland. And I love to kind of tell them a story. It's like two sisters who have to share the same bathroom, and they're really upset about their space. And the articles cannot get accomplished, cannot become official until these two agree to the conditions. And then once those two conditions are met, we have to talk about the settlers that are going to move in this area and how are they going to determine their properties. And oftentimes what would happen is you could self-write your own description of property, and you would describe these properties in like using geographic things like a tree, the big oak tree, or the riverbed, or the rock, the big huge rock. And you can see as settlers continue to move in, those are highly disputable. Rivers dry up, trees can get cut down. And so having this surveyed land, having this kind of rule of law, having these regulations and guidelines in place are really going to establish property ownership and property rights that are attached to that. So those are all very important. Also, it's amazing to me in juniors in high school can't name the Great Lakes. And I give them a map and they have to label them. And I know that kind of seems like, crayons and maps, and that kind of seems elementary, but it is a really good skill for them. And they're just like, I don't know where this lake is. And it is like, you should know this. You should know this. So I think that everybody should be using maps in the classroom. It's a visual, it's tactile, it's just so important. And it's Ohio, where they're going to be the first state developed out of this territory. So there's a certain amount of pride and enthusiasm the students have about learning this information. So I think that those are great things to highlight. Also, timelines, as I had mentioned earlier, this is the celebration of course, America's Declaration of Independence, the 250 years, but in between this and the Constitution, we have the Articles of Confederation, and how I like to use the land ordinances that okay, the Articles of Confederation failed, and it was weak, but two great, wonderful things did happen and were able to be accomplished for our great state to exist. These things had to come before them. So it's a great contribution. I had somebody say the other day that, like in 11 years, we're going to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Constitution. So those kids are probably like in kindergarten right now or first grade, and that's kind of exciting. So I think building upon this America 250 2050, we can keep it going, keep the enthusiasm and momentum going for this next couple of generations. I also, in the PowerPoint, will have several resources. iCivics has a wonderful lesson plan tailored to our state standards. This is from their unit called We're Free, Let's Grow, and so it's tailored to the Northwest Ordinance and has lots of good ideas and suggestions and student handouts available to you, and so I included their timeline. So I want you to think about those of you who are in the classroom or in museums or public history. What do you think are the most important things? And as we might have learned from the panel before, it's the Land Ordinance of 1785 is not really thought about a lot. It's not used a lot. It is not one of the primary documents that's included in our state standards that we're required to teach. I, however, think it's really important, so that's why I include it. But just for a moment, if you would think about what you know already about the Land Ordinance of 1785, what would you include? So just give yourself 30 seconds to think about what you would include, and on the next slide I'll show you what I think is the most important to include. All right, let's see how your list compared to my list. I think, of course, they needed a revenue source, so the selling of land, of course, they couldn't tax, so the selling of land was going to be essential. Again, talking about the property disputes, it was a way to standardize the surveying of land as settlers would move west. And again, I think the most important part is that the townships and sections of these townships are going to be developed, and they still exist. There's not something that was created and went away. It's not the Articles of Confederation. These remnants are still with us. And so I have my students find their townships. They are township trustees. These are elected representatives from these areas. And county governments, it's another level of government that they are not aware of. There are county commissioners. And so this land ordinance instruction lends itself so much to localizing history and government and brings it home to them. It talks about the division of land. You've probably seen the slides. I have them on the corners as well. Every single picture is linked to either the museum or the source that I got the picture from, that either will have a lesson plan attached to it or just more generalized information about the picture. So we're all familiar with how the land was divided, 36 square miles, and then it could be further divided up. There's also a section in the land ordinance about American Revolutionary War soldiers were given particular lots of land. Key to me, and I express this greatly to my students, is we knew from the beginning that in order to have self-rule, self-government, a people must be educated. And they included the sale of Section 16, or the sale of Section 16, to be used for public education purposes. And later, I believe Section 36 was also included. So from the beginning, as we are moving west, it becomes essential. Public education is vitally important for leaders and groups of citizens to make decisions about governing ourselves. It establishes the foundation of our country. And so that's why I just think this ordinance is just too good and too important to miss. And I think it's like this little gem that kind of gets overlooked because the Northwest Ordinance is, bigger. So it set up a way for organizing these Western lands and how it was going to be divided, how future states after the Northwest Ordinance would be included. It provided some sense of order and assembly, like I said, like that rule of law, the procedures, the processes that people should go through to be civilized. It created the grid system. In one of the PowerPoints, I show a visual picture, and I encourage students, when you're up in the air in an airplane and you're traveling, if you're going from the east to west, you can look down and see the actual land and how it's been divided and carved up. And so I show a picture from an airplane, if you're looking at Maryland, looks very different than when you cross over the Appalachians and the Ohio River, and you can definitely see that land is squares and nice little rectangles, and you can actually visually see it still today. And that's a remnant left from this. They think that's pretty cool. And then, of course, this led to the Committee on Public Lands that was created in 1805. So it definitely has its impact on today. And again, I think it's really important that we localize our government and our history. And so I do a map with students. On the left here, you can see is my county. Wayne County is beautiful to do this because it's a beautiful square. And there are the 36 sections. And this map is color-coded. David, that's the paper copy. I give them. They need to locate their address, they find their township, they find their section number. It's all on these maps. They learn the difference between a city, a village, a town. It's just so important. And so I do these blank maps they get with directions. And then the students, and I have copies if you want to see them here, but I just thought I would bring some of their work, this nice Wayne County work here, and it allows students to be creative, and you can see in the sections in which they live. I didn't address this, but one of the great things about working where I work, the Wayne County Schools Career Center is a career tech school. We only have juniors and seniors, but our students come from 10 different public schools, 3 private, and so they're from all over the county. So as they're talking to each other, they're talking about their locations and what township do you live in and what city or village you live in. And so it's just a great conversation for them and a great way for them to connect with their classmates who are from other areas of the county. So that kind of lends itself really well to this ordinance. And I think now, David, you are up. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to go, thanks, Kim. I wanted to go a little bit more into the Northwest Ordinance and how it can be very relevant in a high school or a history or government class. The key provisions that are in there that we should know about. And it never hurts to just have the students read this more than once and highlight it and understand it, just studying the text. But I'm breaking it down here with just some facts about it, the length of it, 14 sections plus 6 articles. It ends up being about 5 pages printed out on a standard, Microsoft Word kind of arrangement. One of the things that's up front in this, and Dr. Lauk talked about this last night, is the dedication or the clarification of inheritance law. This was a throwing out primogeniture, the traditional English idea that the oldest son would inherit everything in the estate. When someone died intestate, was kind of done away with, and that was sort of seen as a Republican idea, small r, Republican idea, more democratic, more equality. So it kind of was an early American ideal, primogenitors in Section 2. It set up the structure of the government, a territorial legislature, a governor, a handful of judges. There's quite a bit of a mention of civil liberties, and you can find some language in there that parallels what ends up landing in the Bill of Rights a couple years later. And of course, the definition for statehood, the standards, and no slavery that we've talked about a little bit. I'm particularly interested in sort of the legislative history of this, or how it came to be. The picture you see there is New York City Hall, where the Congress frequently met in the Confederation period. They moved around a bit, but that was the gathering spot during this era. And the ordinance passed on July 13, 1787. The timing of this was particularly interesting. Now, the final draft of this was put together in the summer of spring and summer of 1787 with a handful of different people. They had their 3 required readings on 3 successive days and then voted to pass it. The list you see on the screen there is just the roll call vote, which can be useful in studying the Confederation Congress. We teach about it, and how I know a lot of high school, middle school teachers teach about the failure of the articles and how they worked. I sometimes think just that visual gives a sense of the voting system and how it played out. And so you see a unanimous vote by state, and there's only one dissenter there. You see kind of a short list. The Confederation Congress was quite empty a lot of the time, but during this particular time, down the road in Philadelphia is the Constitutional Convention, and somewhere between 9 and 12 I recounted that last night. I have 12 members up there. It might have been a little bit fewer of Congress. We're actually over in Philadelphia constructing the Constitution, so that kind of deleted some of the membership and allegedly some of the skill, but a lot of historians have looked at these statesmen, though they're less familiar to us, had comparable experiences in law and policy at the time. Here's a list of some folks that really kind of had a hand in this, not all in the same year, but between playing off the prior policy and some of the different committees that were put together, there's some statesmen that you might recognize that had a hand in drafting it. But perhaps more important was the Massachusetts reverend, scientist, educator, and land speculator, Manasseh Cutler, who's from Ipswich, Massachusetts, north of Boston. And though he was not a member of Congress at this time, he was connected with them, and he attended sessions of Congress leading up to this and promised Congress that he convinced them that he would bring an actual large and immediate settlement of the most robust and industrial people of America to this place. So he was really the chief lobbyist in America at this time for this purpose, a one-man linkage institution. The Ohio Company that he and a handful of other men formed up in Ipswich ended up getting a passage of land that's just south of the Seven Ranges, and he has a lot of contributions to the area, including being the father of OU, Ohio University. That school's a little older than this one. I think they like to remind you all that down the road. Is that the case? So a very instrumental player in this. Any folks teaching U.S. history will know that it seems like a perpetual concern on the end of course exam is that slavery wasn't included, and that it kind of led on to the 13th Amendment and such. So just a sample question there that you've probably seen before from the end of course exam. But let's talk about the slavery clause, or the Article 6. It's kind of curious, and this has come up yesterday and today, how in the world could a new country that was battling this debate in Philadelphia, it nearly tore apart the Constitutional Convention, how did it so easily work its way into the Northwest Ordinance straddling that same summer? And we mentioned Jefferson's vote earlier. Dr. Finkelman mentioned that it didn't do it immediately, but it was still pretty well defeated, a sectional vote in the Congress at the time, and Jefferson was the only Southern member who actually voted for his own resolution. How, just 2 years later or so, did we get a unanimous vote for this ending of slavery in this new section? Some refer to it as the Ipswich miracle. Nathan Dane was a Massachusetts member of Congress at the time and was very good friends with Manasseh Cutler. That was his minister. They were from the same town of Ipswich, so this became dubbed that. Cutler claims to have given Dane Article 6 to introduce. The authorship of this is sort of dubious. It's kind of hard to know exactly how that went down. But nonetheless, this went into the act late in the game and was passed after those 3 successive readings. My question is was it really a miracle? Why did Southerners agree to this so quickly when they hadn't before? And there were some differences, like the river would be the line of where slavery would exist, or not entirely west. There was also an economic selfishness to this. If we can prevent slavery from going that direction, our states will do better in selling products. And finally, there's a lot of belief, and there's some proof that Cutler traveled to the Constitutional Convention during this time, right after the vote on the Northwest Ordinance, or in between, to discuss this as they were coming up with things like the 3/5 clause. So some people characterize this as part of the Compromise of 1787 to kind of balance the concerns for slavery. And we should also point out that and it was said yesterday too, that slavery was not non-existent in the area. There were some folks who claimed to be grandfathered in. I believe some courts agreed with that along the way. And Indiana, as it was becoming its own territorial legislature, had passed some laws about indentured servitude to kind of create a loophole around the slavery provision. Real quick, the politics of this era and the government structure was set up where General Arthur St. Clair was the first governor of the area, and he ruled with quite a monarchical kind of approach. He insisted the folks living in this territory were subjects, not citizens. There was a lot of, the word colony and colonial is used a lot to try to describe this relationship, and it's kind of seems ironic or just wouldn't exist a few years after defeating the British, but that was sort of the dynamic that existed. And it was really part of something that led to the Ohio statehood. And a lot of us who teach in high school have to make sure the students understand the 1802 Constitution and the 1851. And here's a quote from one of our founders, Thomas Worthington: "The present arbitrary government is better suited for an English or Spanish colony than for citizens of the United States." This was also kind of a pivot point when Jeffersonian Republicans were sort of taking over Congress, and they saw this as the bad relationship between St. Clair and a lot of the leaders of Ohio. If we can get these folks to become a state sooner, it's only going to give us more of an advantage in the House and Senate. And so it kind of sped up statehood. And some of these things are, I think you can look at to just help the students have the reasons for some of these things and the history behind it. I think it will help them. One of the last things I wanted to say was the last quote was one of the judges. I think he was operating out of Cincinnati. His name was William Goforth. I like that name. It would only be better if it was Go West. That he said he wrote to Jefferson in 1802 on the heels of statehood that it is true that the situation here is the true transcript of old English governments. Our governor is clothed with all the power of a British nabob. So those are some things that I would make connections with in high school social studies classes. I'm not going to go over this complete list here, but we're going to leave it in the slide for you to, if you want to download it, you have kind of a handy list of provisions that are there. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kim here.
We're going to make you do some work, just like we do to our students. So get ready. All right, you can do this with a partner near you, close to you. There is a QR code there that you could you upload on your phone. Or we have, the ladies agreed to pass out some paper and pens if you need any. You could just raise your hand if you need them. We're just going to essentially ask you to think and reflect about what you heard, what you saw today. I also have the link here to the Harvard website that gives you the techniques and research behind this as a reflective activity in the classroom. But what we're asking you to do is just answer a few questions. What did you see today that you like? What would you take back and use to your classroom? What do you think about what you saw, what you heard? What was missing? And then wonder, like, what did we miss? What could be included? What would you add? So I'll open up this so you can sort of see the survey. It's just a Google form. It's going to autosave. There's also an opportunity for you to put your email address if you just want this material sent to you. David put a link to a packet of primary documents that he uses in the classroom, and I believe the ladies have that as well. So if you want a paper copy of that, the ladies will get that to you. But here are the questions that we're asking you to complete, so we have some reflection. You can talk to your neighbor or get into a small group. We'd like to give you about 5 minutes if you're doing well. We can go to 10 if it's really going well and you need some more time. But again, the questions we're asking, so you can put it on paper or the form. What are some ideas that you heard today that you could take back and use in your classroom, your museums, in your life? Share with your neighbor. What would you do to modify these lessons to meet the needs of your special needs students or students who would need additional accommodations, modifications? How would you extend these lessons to gifted and talented students or to other students' ELA? You know, what could you do to expand a greater base of knowledge to a greater group of students? Then we'd also like to know how you teach Northwest Ordinance, and there'll be an opportunity for you to share with the group as well on things that you do that work well so that we can collaborate on this and teaching these documents. Are there any questions before we allow you to work? All right. We're going to come around and be checking to make sure you're on task.
All right.
I'll take that side.
Meanwhile, we have like pulled up the car while that's running. Get out of my way. This is why, and
is kind of the stoppage of the Denver conspiracy
Yes,
and all of that.
yes.
How do you keep them from going home when the wars were going on and they're not going to sign a peace treaty? Often comes up with the leader because they already had a plan to settle this war. But you say, you do that, and then oh, never mind, because you're throwing the heart of all bets are off. They just dust it off to the plan and say, let's do it in Ohio instead.
And it's like, you just got that talking about the nerds, like, the name is this. This is the attempt to solve something. And now it's just in there. It's like every single thing in every season is some of this. And it should have, guys, this all hangs together. Sit back and think about all the way back, you know, had was a revolutionary war. They have to get in there. Otherwise, there's no connection. Because there are
It's the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
Takeaways.
Takeaways.
I can ask them to share.
We were only in Marietta before the Constitution.
Come on up here. We ready? You want to call them back together?
Yeah. All right, class, thank you for your collaboration. I had lots of great questions. It was nice to get to have personal conversations with you as well. All right, David?
Well, we'd love to hear some ideas that you have or some things you may have tried in the classroom or some things that just popped in your head. If you had a chance to take a look at those primary sources too, how might you want to use those or suggestions for how others may use those? So we got some microphones ready to circulate, so
We'll start here.
So one of the things that I had interpreted, and I might be wrong and would love to be corrected if not, but the plots of land being set up as different acreages that they were going to offer as full, partial, small. Again, we've talked a lot about aspirational kinds of things that this set up. And to me, one of the things that I stress for my students is the idea that we're trying to create kind of a mixed economic background society, that we want to blend some of the wealthier with middle class, with lower class farmers, and put everybody together. And maybe that's part of that Jeffersonian ideal. So I tend to stress that as well and look at how that goes. And I do an activity where they kind of map that out and look for some of those traces. The other thing, and I don't know, Mr. Britton might be able to help me, or Ms. Tabler, the district that I teach in contains the very, very small intersection titled Cutler. And it also has a lake titled Vito Lake. And there's a story about that I've always heard is kind of legendary, and I don't know the exact details about the veto process that went on with this, or the possibility, because I'd always heard it related to Article 6 and that slavery portion. So I didn't know if.
I believe we have an answer over here, maybe.
Yeah, Andy teaches at my former high school. Yeah, the whole story with Cutler and with Article 6, it is his son, Judge Ephraim Cutler, who is one of the delegates to goes to the Ohio Constitution Convention, that goes on the floor, gives an impassioned speech about the evils of slavery and why his father lobbied that. And for getting the Virginians' amendment defeated and vetoed from being included in the Ohio Constitution, they name his hometown where he lived Constitution. And then for that veto of that particular slavery provision, the town where I grew up, Vito, is named for that as well. It's all about the slavery thing, but it's his son, Judge Ephraim Cutler, who ironically is the one that's pushing for public funding of education. He's the guy who kind of is the driving force of that after the Ohio Constitution Convention.
I just want to add about the property distribution, that something they can relate to is like the Ohio company comes in, right, buys in lots of land and then sells it off for themselves to profit. And so then you talk about Marietta being the first settlement, and so you can also tie that in economically as well. All right, we had another question.
This wasn't a question. I'm Aaron Augenstein, Director of Campus Martius in the Ohio River Museums, and this, he didn't identify himself. Scott Britton, Director of the Castle of Marietta. I'm going to speak on behalf of us, but if you have a group of students, homeschool students, whatever age, and you want to bring them to Marietta, we want you to come to Marietta. We'll work with you to get you there. We both have education directors who are not here because we're here, I guess. But we come and get our cards. Whatever kind of group of kids you want to bring, we get groups of kids from like Boys and Girls Clubs in the summer. Whatever group of students or adult learners you want to bring to Marietta, we can also help you craft visiting some of those places that are free, our earthworks, monuments like that. So please see us or get our information because we want you to come to Marietta.
Do you have virtual tours, and do you Zoom with students? We do a lot of Zooming with
We're
museums.
working on that. Keep in mind, we are Appalachian, Ohio, and truly high-speed internet is not necessarily a given where we are. So we're working on that. Those are also things that are pretty costly. So we're working toward that, but we do want to visit with you as best we can. So yeah, we can get resources together.
I want to second that. I've taken my students over. Oh, sorry. I want to second that. I teach in Athens, which is about 45 minutes from you. And Scott has given a tour of Mound Cemetery, where there are more Revolutionary War officers buried than there are in any cemetery on the East Coast. And Campus Martius, the history there is so rich. The students leave their facilities with a greater connection and understanding of our Revolutionary history.
And there was a question here, the gentleman in
Or comment, yeah.
purple, and then we'll take the gentleman in the back. Can we get a microphone? Yeah. Front. You had your hand up? Yeah.
So I don't want to make it sound like a commercial, but I'm different. I work with a 501c3 educational group that works on decision-making and helping students and the public understand how decisions were made for Cold War history, modern history. We do Cuban Missile Crisis, American Revolution, and First and Second Continental Congress. So one of the things that we do, because you were asking about what techniques do you use to rapidly bring people into the topic, is we've been using 11 by 17 sheets and try to use vibrant colors and then put those in the laminate things like they pass posters around in, and that becomes a kinesthetic that you can pass around. It's also an instant reference so that you don't have to do a lecture about all the stuff. You let them experience it if that topic comes up, or that you promote that topic using that tool. The other thing that we've started doing is we've been taking advantage of the maker spaces at the different libraries, because Delaware up here north of us is like the richest county in the state of Ohio, and they have a maker space in 2 of their libraries. So we can make very inexpensive vinyl reproductions of non-copyrighted maps and use things you're allowed to use under fair use that you can spread out across the whole table. So you could make a map of the whole Northwest Territory and spread it out, and they'll all be doing this.
That's very good.
I'd also like to encourage you to include any links that you have, like to the museums, Marietta, to your site. Those of you who respond on the form are going to be able to see everybody's responses, and so you can share there. You know, teachers know how to collaborate and bring people together. So I encourage you, if you have links to share, to please drop them in there so that everybody has use and access to them. Thank you. All right, there was somebody in the back.
Could you say a little bit more about how the Revolutionary War veterans were being compensated and how that worked out practically? I don't understand how that actually worked.
Under the Land Ordinance of 1785, based on their rank, they were given a certain acreage of land, and they got first choice before it was sold to the public, is my understanding, is how it's read. You caught me. I don't know. I have to go. It's the document right here. It's given to them. Thank you. I just froze. Panic. Sorry. Yeah, I have the document here. I could look it up. But yes, I do know that it was divided, and the order of rank that you served in the Revolutionary War provided you with larger lots.
This is great. Thank you so much. Thank you for your teaching and taking primary sources so seriously. I speak for every college educator in here too. That we constantly are so thankful for the teachers who bring any good primary sources into the classroom and give our students the skills. I talked about this yesterday, so I won't belabor it. But what you didn't mention was that dealing with the Northwest Ordinance, or even the sort of different associations of the land as foreign policy instruments, and in thinking about the nation state as a weak nation beset by internal and external enemies and threats. And I find often, I'm drawn to that way of thinking about this document, in part because it brings in a different set of questions for students and wider publics to consider, and it overturns some of our received wisdoms about the era. Americans tend to read back into this period a strong country, a more well-gridded country, an organized country, right? The Northwest Ordinance is a stab at doing all those things, but that hasn't happened yet, right? So it's a nice way to show them just how halting everything is. And I think what the scholars were saying yesterday, and you could do the Treaty of Paris, you could look at some of the negotiations, Greenville, and then you could also combine that with social historical sources so that they could see themselves in that history. I find that's pretty effective, certainly at the college level. So just some thoughts.
Sorry.
Be sure and put these things in that form so people can see them later, right?
Yeah. I was going to add to that. I love talking about like the proclamation line, right? And they're told, don't go past west. But they do anyway. There's a great conversation that students love about who would go, what drives them there. And that's a great conversation and something that they're not used to thinking about and inquiring about. So it raises that curiosity. Yeah. There's a question back in the back there.
Mike Moran, Marietta College history graduate, local attorney, and history enthusiast. I just want to say I'm incredibly impressed with what you two are doing with history, and so encouraged. I've taught law and incidentally history at a law school and at DeVry University as well. But what you're doing with primary sources, with maps, I was the 27th Franklin County recorder, and some of the most easy to access and interesting primary sources you're ever going to run across are land title records, probate court records, and those sorts of documents where literally you're seeing the actual handwriting of the people that at the time didn't know they were making history, they were just living. So really encouraged to see what you're doing with geography, cultural geography, the use of the maps. I think that's incredibly beneficial and encouraging, and in this day and age when, quite frankly, those of us who spend time in Southeast Ohio like paper maps because phones don't work down there. Yeah, Google Maps doesn't work down in Washington County so good when you get out in the county. So incredibly great work, and I just wanted to also put in a plug for the fact that the Ohio Academy of History on March 20th and 21st is having its annual conference at Marietta College. And I want to invite all the teachers here to consider attending that. It's very low cost. And I've got a panel discussion that Mr. Britton is part of, and the Washington County Recorder is part of, and some other people. And we're going to be talking about the Revolutionary War Veterans Graves Project, which is part of the Commission's outreach that they've funded to crowdsource the mapping of all the Revolutionary War veterans' graves. It's a great opportunity for public history engagement by students. You can download an app on your phone, on your iPhone, and map cemeteries and veterans' graves throughout the state. So, and the information is on these postcards that they've got on the table out there, and I'll be glad to hand one if anybody wants one. So, thank you again for what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, I was going to say much of what Michael just said about complimenting you on these resources, and I think it's really great. I have a lot of takeaways. So congratulations on your work, and thank you. I wanted to mention one other, I think, teacher tool. Does anybody know why I might mention East Liverpool, Ohio? Okay, I had a sense I was in the room where there would be some knowledge of the point of beginning, the first survey of the Northwest Territory. I know the town of East Liverpool really wants to do more to educate the public about this, surveying and just the significance of the Northwest Ordinance and Territory. So I just thought I would give a quick plug to our friends in East Liverpool who really want to do more with that marker. Yeah, so it's really pretty significant. The author Simon Winchester begins one of his books with that point of beginning. So, and it is one of our 76 National Historic Landmarks. I think we have a friend here who does a lot of work with our NHLs, but I don't see her in the room. Okay, enough for me. Thank you very much for this work.
There was a question back here, I think, and then over here.
Hi, I live in a part of Ohio that's called the Firelands. It's part of the Connecticut Western Reserve, and it's interesting when you're talking about Revolutionary War history. I'm a big Revolutionary War history buff. I go all over the country to historical sites related to the Revolutionary War. I was at Lexington and Concord last April for the 250th of that. But it's interesting to me that, when I tell people that one of the reasons we're here in this location is because of Benedict Arnold. And they're like looking at me like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, because they don't know about him burning, that part of Connecticut that we have so many towns in where I live. I live in Norwalk, Ohio, named for Norwalk, Connecticut. Just down the road is New London. Just down the road is New Haven. All of these places that are Ohio places with Connecticut names, and and I wonder, is that something that you all talk about? Is that connection to try to draw that connection between why we're here and we're at the 250th of the American Revolution, how that relates to what happened 250 years ago?
I confess I haven't, but I've heard some more stuff on this trip that makes you think about it. The town of when I travel from my hometown back to Cincinnati, the town of New Boston, and there's probably, I'm sure there's some others that, they never got large, but you can just tell they're coming from New England kind of names, but haven't been, but that's a darn good idea.
I have two stories in which I relate it. From Wayne County, we are named after General Mad Anthony Wayne, and the students love to hear about why he was called Bad. And Wayne was one of the original 10 counties in the Northwest Ordinance. But the town that I grew up in, Worcester, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but we can tell who belongs and who doesn't based on how you pronounce it. General David Worcester was a Connecticut regiment and never stepped foot in the town of Worcester. But as people moved west and he was so beloved, they named their town as they first settled after him. And so that's a great connection to the American Revolution and then, of course, Mad Anthony Wayne. So again, connecting that past to the present is so relevant. It is so important for these young folks to see how everything that happens in our past is connected to where we are today. So those would be my two stories.
I think, like Chris, I've been trying to think about all of our discussions yesterday and how they maybe kind of connect or could extend, I think, what we've been talking about in this particular session. And I think one of the best answers to the very difficult question posed, like, what is the one thing that you want students to know? And I think this answer was provided by Jasmine Sutton, which is that the Northwest Ordinance meant different things to different people. And I've been thinking about how is it that you can make that work for sort of students in the classroom, and whether or not it might be possible to do a kind of carousel activity where you want students to imagine that they're, Nathan Dane, and you want students to imagine, maybe you pick a particular native tribe in your particular sort of area of Ohio, and maybe you pick, and there are like a handful of stories about Black people in very early Ohio. That can be found often in the local county histories. So almost every Ohio county has a history of, and it's 1,000 pages long. And if you look carefully enough, usually there are a few Black people who are interwoven here and there. You may just have snippets, and they could go from kind of station to station thinking, what does the Northwest Ordinance mean to these people? And I think maybe that's also sort of a way of bringing, Chris's suggestion to think about the kind of foreign policy dimensions of, if you're a Native person, what does the Northwest Territory and the Northwest Ordinance and the Land Ordinance, what does this mean to you? What do you see it attempting to accomplish? Does it actually change anything immediately for you, or do you see it as just the Americans kind of playing like a power grab or a projection of power that isn't actually like working out kind of on the ground? And I think there could be some really interesting ways of helping students kind of imagine themselves into all of these different sort of positionalities and all of the different motivations and kind of expectations I think that people are going to have about how this thing is going to work and what it maybe means for them either in their own life or for sort of their group, maybe sort of or people like them, kind of moving on to the future. Anyway, just an idea. I think it could be adapted too for different parts of Ohio, but I think you could probably have a kind of like a generic kind of like, I'm a person in Ohio, have students read a little bit about them. Maybe there are some primary sources that you could share with them at the stations, and then have them kind of talk about those different perspectives.
I also failed to include in the beginning, in the lesson plan links that you'll find, there is a land acknowledgement of Native American lands. And so I didn't mean to exclude that. I thought maybe that would come up. But that is also part of the lesson, is that they acknowledge it wasn't our land to take, and that they know what tribes were what in area and how that was developed first before we arrived. So I love that idea. I love the raising the curiosities. It reminds me of like, in our generation, we had Oregon trails. And, everybody dies of dysentery. But, what an interesting concept to have them thinking about that, how it meant different things for different people. One of the things I challenge them about is the genders. Like, why would women go? That's hard work. That's dangerous out there. And so what would, those kinds of questions are really good to be asking them.
We have one more over here.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Professor Twitty. I appreciate that. I shared a lesson that I think really, gets to the heart of what you just said too with everyone, and feel free to use it if it's shared. The gentleman's comment about East Liverpool also triggered something in my mind that in my classroom, teenagers like us and like all the colonists, Americans, they love stuff. And so the more that I can expose them to interacting with stuff and looking and analyzing stuff, it's an opportunity to bring in art history, the commodities that were traded along waterways in parallel with trade, like the scholars were mentioning yesterday, the wheat, Ohio wheat. They just love looking at stuff. They love talking about stuff, what was valuable to communities. I'm thinking about East Liverpool ceramics and how those ceramics cross the Mississippi. They cross oceans. So I just wanted to encourage too the bringing in of the material culture. The Metropolitan Museum of Art just comes to mind as like you can funnel location, time period, and have students really dig into that sourcing information. It can be it can be impactful for especially visual students.
Thank you.
We got one more here, I think, and then maybe we'll go to some slides after that. Or, well,
You want to do yours first
Yeah.
since she's traveling?
yeah, go ahead.
I don't know whether Dr. Twitty knew it, but my presentation right after the lunch period is going to be talking about how the kids can be the actual characters related to the people in their area and how you can export that not only around your local area, but it ties into all of Ohio and all of the Northwest Territory with those connections. But the one quick thing I wanted to say, Dr. Finkelman, when he was talking about the provisions of religion, you talked about Section 16 with the school districts and sale or lease of that land. You don't actually own it, but the revenue from that supports the schools. There was also Section 19, which was ministerial land, which only worked in Washington County and Hamilton County, and they got rid of it because it was a little unwieldy. But all of that money was collected. Every church or religious organization submitted their membership rolls. They tallied up everything and they split it evenly. All of that revenue went to building churches, providing salaries for ministers and things of that sort. So that went into that whole religious component. It didn't matter what your religious affiliation. Abel Sargent, with some of his really weird, obscure religious ideas that ended up killing people, his following got money from all of those type of things as well. So just the religious component along with the school component as well.
Thank you.
Chris Green from the Chase Center. Brian is going to advertise our what's happening in June in a second, so I don't want to preempt that. But one of the things we're putting together for this summer is we have these 3 years, and we're putting together a simulation exercise about the Declaration this summer. But next year, we're going to have simulation about the Constitution. And, I mean, this Northwest Ordinance stuff about people going back and forth is like, I mean, it's catnip for like setting up a simulation exercise where you're in Philadelphia fussing for a certain amount of time. They're like, oh, this dude has arrived, and maybe the information comes in dribs and drabs, like the letter to Rufus King, and Rufus King, the same guy who's on this committee of style at the end, and he's still in Congress in 1819. Just all of that kind of stuff. Stay tuned, and if you're into role playing exercises for your students, we will have material online soon. A portal will open soon, but we don't have a URL quite yet.
Well, we hope you get use out of those things we've put in your hands, and Kimberly has put together a nice digital linked list of some additional sources that's on the PowerPoint here. So just taking a glance at those, they're easily accessible.
As we are all celebrating the America 250, I would like to challenge you all to help me make Ohio first place. There's a collaboration of civic organizations, Bill of Rights Institute, and iCivics that are running a contest called the Civic Star Challenge. When you get the PowerPoint, you can click on it. You could also Google it. And teachers are encouraged, K through college professors, please, you could do this as well. And all you have to do is record what you are doing on a daily basis and how it's related to the American Revolution. There are 7 themes like natural rights, consent of the governed. There's a whole bunch of themes. It's really just click buttons and you enter your name. Every quarter, they draw a teacher's name. They draw 60 names a quarter, and you get $300 in swag for your students. At the end of the year, after 4 quarters, there's like thousands of dollars in which you can enter. There's an essay contest for your students. There's an essay contest for the teachers. But what bothers me the most is Ohio is in 4th place. It updates daily, and I can tell you of Ohio's 124, 75 of those are mine. And I thank you. I'm not competitive, right, honey? I have no athletic competitiveness, but this means something to me. I want Ohio to show up, and I want us to be a leader in the nation of what we're doing for America 250. So please, I challenge you, I encourage you. It's really easy to fill out. It's really simple, and there's money and rewards, and Ohio needs to be number 1. And I have a very, I know the person in Kansas who is leading her department. Her whole entire department is contributing to Kansas on this map. So as you enter, the total goes up. But please, and go back to your school districts and your teachers. And again, it's for college. It's K through secondary. Please enter. We already are teaching these things. Let's mark it down, record it. And I want to see next week. I'm coming to your home. No, but please just showcase what we do in Ohio to celebrate America 250. Thank you.
And here's a QR code and our email addresses and such. If you want to grab that.
That will give you the entire presentation that has all the links. Free. As long as you post something on a Civic Star Challenge.
Almost there.
I think there's still a couple taking pictures.
All right, as they're wrapping that up, our final slide is basically a thank you and any final questions. Does anybody have any final concerns or anything?
Or questions, Dan?
Or questions?
I'm going to my,
We
can come over here.
Okay, yeah.
We're supposed to be here for Q&A. I'm a rule follower.
So, okay, so apologies for the second question, but at the end of the Northwest Ordinance, we have this little note saying we repeal the Land Ordinance of 1784. What is the relationship between the Land Ordinance of 1785 and the 104 and Northwest Ordinance? Are they covering different subjects? How is this? How do they relate?
I'm looking to him.
So there's a federal component, a federal section that's in the earlier one that's not in the other ones. I know that there's there's the school section, there's the ministerial section, and there was a federal section originally that is not part of the later one. But
It gets established in, I think, the Homestead Act as well. It gets absolved into that, and it leads the way for the basis for public land survey of, I think it's 1805. I'm trying to get my dates. Didn't have it down. But yeah, it kind of is the predecessor and gets absolved into federal legislation later. Any other questions?
Anybody else have anything?
Could be anything general. While we're waiting for the microphone, I do have some quote cards. I have this nice little Declaration of Independence. I have book cards. I have stickers, 32 years of civic organizations that have given us stickers. You're welcome to any of it at the end.
So my group does college level and general public as well as high school. And we've been doing more high school events recently. So one of the things that we're discovering, because there's more and more demand for short lesson cycles, we used to run events that were up to 6 hours to educate people on things because they'd be like an all-day production. And then we went to 4, and now we're getting more demand for 2. So we're trying to work on methodologies to compress information so it can be rapidly absorbed. I hate to make it sound like we're doing a video screen, but basically, we've got these instant gratification things going on with our students. So one of the challenges is how to condense that stuff. So I talked about a couple of the techniques that we were using because you make it more visual, you make it more kinesthetic, you have handouts that you can provide just in time. But there are a couple of things that we're seeing. One is the very decreased attention span from what it used to be. And the other thing that we're seeing
Teachers
is
included.
because they're teaching to the standard most of the time, there are lots of things that to our older staff are sort of second nature because we've studied it more and longer, and now there's more diversity in curriculum in modern classes in many ways than there used to be. But, we had the civics and we had the structure. So things that we would assume the students would know, we're discovering they're not. So what kinds of things have you seen that you presumed that they would know before they went into the classroom? I know it's different at 8th grade versus 12th versus college, but I think that comparison can be illustrative for everybody.
I harp on this on the daily, but in my 32 years, I've seen this difference in the type of students that we're getting and the basic knowledge that they have. State standards are great, but we've had a decrease in civics for elementary, and because it's no longer a tested subject, they are coming to me as an 11th grader with very limited skill sets in social studies, geography, economics, history, and it has been devastating. It makes my job much more difficult. For me, I want students to know the 4 levels of government. Like, national government isn't everything, but I think our content standards are kind of geared that way. And there are 3 branches of government, and the Constitution tells each what to do. I wish those would be, if I had miracle, if I could do, I wish in 8th grade they had all that before they came to me in the 11th grade, and I'm sure for college professors they're seeing the same thing. We were talking last night, I teach a CCP government class. What's really hard for high school CCP students, they haven't had a year full of high school government. And so how do you get them to be thinking about those higher level critical thinking skills required to read a college text if you don't know the 4 levels? They don't know the difference between the Declaration and the Constitution. Have you seen, by the way, on the America 250, there are a lot of people selling things that say America 250, and it's the wording of the Constitution, not the Declaration. Those are people profiting, and people are buying those things. That is our society right now, and so that would be mine.
I'm a work at a pretty good college-bound kind of school, and the 11th grade U.S. history teachers that teach them before they get to me are real good. So honestly, I like your ideas about just moving around and not looking at a screen all the time. Can elevate their concern, play in a position, becoming somebody instead of just reading about somebody is really useful. But I don't have quite the same story as her, but just whatever we can do, to increase that, would be on the lookout for it.
Did that answer your question for you? Okay.
Well, thanks so much. I think that's going to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
We hope you enjoy your lunch. Thank you so much. And teachers or anybody, please come up and help yourself to any of the stuff that I brought. I appreciate you. Thank you.